Welcome to today's Explainer. We're taking some pretty dense environmental science and turning it into a dynamic look at how climate change actually interacts with the very ground beneath our feet. I'm so glad you're here because we've got a seriously fascinating journey ahead as we unpack exactly how the atmosphere interacts with the soil we stand on and why the health of one dictates the survival of the other.
Let's kick things off with a massive, sobering statistic just to set the stage here. A full one-third of our planet's surface is currently affected by this alarming process of environmental decay. To put that into perspective, that is actively impacting over 1 billion people worldwide right now. The United Nations was actually so deeply concerned by how fast this is exacerbating that they dedicated an entire year just to raise awareness about it, noting its massive implications for global development goals. It's a staggering scale of environmental change.
Now, everything we're diving into today comes straight from a really foundational text called Climate and Land Degradation. It's part of the Environmental Science and Engineering series, edited by some absolute heavy hitters in the field, which gives our explainer a ton of scientific weight today. Literally, every data point, every case study, and all the solutions we're going to look at are pulled right from the rigorous research compiled by dozens of global experts inside this volume. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 5 key areas. First, the silent environmental crisis. Second, threat to food security. Third, the climate change connection. Fourth, tracking a global threat. And finally, number 5, solutions and sustainable management. All right, diving right into section 1, the silent environmental crisis, defining the problem beneath our feet. So we need to establish a shared baseline right out of the gate. According to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, here is exactly what we mean when we talk about the land literally dying. Land degradation is defined as the loss of the land's biological productivity caused by human-induced factors and climate change. This isn't just some inevitable natural cycle. It's our own hands, combined with shifting climates, actively stripping the Earth of its ability to produce and sustain life. Which brings us to section 2, threat to food security, a growing population on shrinking resources. You really gotta see how small our margin for error is here, just 11%. That tiny little 11% represents the prime global land surface that we actually have to rely on for our food. The vast majority of the Earth, 89%, is simply not prime agricultural land. We are leaning so incredibly hard on this tiny sliver to feed billions of people, which makes preserving it absolutely crucial. And when you pair that minuscule fraction of prime land with this math, rapid population growth colliding with drastically shrinking crop yields, man, the gravity of this crisis just becomes undeniable. The research highlights that we're looking at global population scaling up to 8.2 billion people by 2020. Yet at the exact same time, soil degradation is severe enough to reduce crop yields on about 16% of our agricultural land globally. And in highly vulnerable places like sub-Saharan Africa, it's even worse. They're looking at cumulative productivity losses estimated at a staggering 20% over just the last 40 years. So we've got way more mouths to feed, but drastically less productive dirt to grow that food in. Let's move to section 3, the climate change connection, the vicious feedback loop. So why is this happening so incredibly fast? Well, it comes down to a really dangerous cause and effect loop. On one side, you have climate extremes. We're talking heat waves, heavy rain, floods, and severe droughts. These directly trigger massive land degradation, like devastating landslides and huge soil erosion from wind and water. But then, on the flip side, you have the land degradation itself. When land degrades, it loses a massive amount of its terrestrial carbon pool. That carbon gets released right into the atmosphere, which just fuels even more warming. It's a total vicious cycle. Extreme weather destroys the land, and then that degraded, carbon-depleted land turns right around and worsens the climate. There's a quote right from the book's preface that totally hits the nail on the head regarding how volatile this is. It says, climate variability, climate change, and land degradation are intimately linked and are generating unexpected effects. See, this is not just a simple, linear A causes B kind of problem. It's a compounding web. For example, the authors point out how these changes are creating the perfect weather conditions for huge wildfires to just spark and spread across large parts of the globe. It's unexpected, it's unpredictable, and it's highly dangerous. Moving right along to section 4, tracking a global threat, examining the worldwide impact. Let's broaden our scope a bit to see how this actually looks on the ground. Using these micro case studies from the text, we can really see the diverse global reach of this crisis.
Over in Tanzania, the issue shows up locally as severe wind erosion and these massive, blinding dust storms. Up in the northern Mediterranean, extreme rainfall is causing catastrophic floods, landslides, and debris flows. Down in Peru, they are battling the degradation of their incredibly unique, hyper-arid Atikapa fog oases. And over in Australia, experts are dealing with widespread rangeland degradation tied to their specific climate. So the physical symptoms, they vary wildly depending on your geography, but the underlying disease is exactly the same everywhere. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. This text isn't just an encyclopedia of a hopeless situation. It actually chronicles an active global rescue mission. The whole thing crystallized back in 2006 at an international workshop in Arusha, Tanzania. Just think about the sheer scale of this collaboration for a second. 64 leading experts from 30 different countries, plus 5 major UN agencies, all joining forces. Their unified goal? To figure out exactly how to use weather and climate data to actively monitor, assess, and ultimately fight back against land degradation. And this effort has some serious institutional muscle behind it. You've got the World Meteorological Organization and the Tanzania Meteorological Agency partnering directly with the UN's Convention to Combat Desertification. Because here's the thing, you simply cannot fix the soil without understanding the weather. By pairing up top-tier climate data with potential land management practices, these groups are building the actual foundation for real, scalable mitigation technologies. And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Solutions and Sustainable Management, the Path to Restoration. So the most crucial takeaway here is that we aren't powerless. We have a clear sequence of actionable steps to actively mitigate this disaster. As outlined in the text, Step 1 happens right at the ground level, implementing conservation tillage cropping. That basically means disrupting the soil a lot less when planting, using natural green manure systems, and just taking optimal care of the dirt. Step 2 goes bigger, with widespread afforestation, meaning strategic tree plantings to stabilize the land and restore degraded catchments. And Step 3 leans heavily on tech, utilizing effective early warning systems. If we can predict impending droughts and floods, we can help communities actually prepare before the extreme weather hits. From how we plow the dirt to how we predict the sky, these are concrete, science-backed steps forward. Now, one of the most fascinating takeaways here is the dual power of carbon sequestration. The research emphasizes that capturing carbon in our soil ecosystems doesn't just do one thing. It's like a 2-for-1 deal. It physically heals the soil, actively increasing its fertility and biological productivity, while at the exact same time pulling those harmful carbon emissions right out of the atmosphere. It's a real game changer that directly breaks that vicious climate feedback loop we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought about our race against time here. Can we actually implement these sustainable practices and reverse the damage before our remaining 11% of prime land can literally no longer support us? Because this explainer shows us the tools absolutely exist. We've got the data, we've got the meteorological insights, and we know the sustainable management techniques. Getting them funded and applied globally? Well, that is the ultimate challenge of our era. Because at the end of the day, we aren't just talking about saving dirt. We're talking about securing the very future of human survival. Thank you so much for hanging out and joining me on this deep dive into the ground beneath our feet.